I wasn't from a Christian background, my parents weren't saved. They didn't believe in God. When I was really young, when I was actually a kid, I remember sort of sitting on the edge of my bed and thinking, I believe in that, God's real. I was like, God's real. And I remember asking my parents, I was like 5 or 6, why don't we go to church? Why is it we don't, on a Sunday, go to church? There's no reason for that. And they just said, that's just not what we do. It wasn't like a thing against church. It's just, we don't do that. And I remember sitting on the edge of my bed and talking to God at that point and saying that when I'm older, I'll go to church. That's something I'm going to put into my life. I don't know what it was. And then obviously as you grow older, when I get to 12, 13, you just get caught up in things in what the world teaches you. So by that point, the idea of going to church was not cool, was not in with what I was doing. And I started hanging around with people at school that were Christians, that started going to this life church, as you will. And when I had an opportunity to go with them to church, by this point I wasn't interested. So it was, I don't want to go, it's not really for me. Even though deep down probably I was like, look, I'm curious and I believe there's something more to life than what I'm living. I'm 14 years old. It's not about that right now. It's about being cool or whatever it was. And so I wasn't interested at all. And then there was a guy who came over to the church from America. And it was the first time I'd ever met a guy who was so passionate about what he believed. His life, you could see that his life, as it says in Galatians, was no longer his own. He lived it and breathed it. He loved God with all his heart. And we used to play a lot of basketball. We used to go down the courts and he used to come along. He started talking to me and he started really laying it down with me. No one had ever kind of laid down the truth with me before. And he laid it down such in a way that it got me such convicted that my life wasn't really my own, that there was more of an accountability to my life, that if I made that decision to step out and say, yeah, I believe that God's real, then I knew that my life would take a different purpose. I knew that. And I remember having a real strong conversation once with him and saying, look, this is not what my family believe, therefore I'm going to follow in them footsteps. This was my time that God was really speaking to me and calling me, and that it was time to almost surrender. And if I didn't surrender, I just inside just knew that my life was not going to go the way it should, and that I was only going to regret not making this decision. Rather than having a testimony where I've had all this maybe mess happen to me. At 15, I made a decision right there and then, and I always look back and think, if I wouldn't have made that decision, then I might have a testimony that's quite heartbreaking, that things would have happened and I would have made the wrong choice. I would tell anybody who's 15, 16 in those teenage years, there's so much pressure to be something or to be like somebody else, because there's so much media and influence thrown at us that we've got to look a certain way, act a certain way, and that is what is acceptable. But if you strip all that away, even if for older people, if you strip it all away, when you take away your career and all the money you have and who you think you are in the eyes of others, you took that away and just got real and said who I am before God, then you'll come to realise how much you really need Him.